Our brains are one of the most incredible things in the world, and they are also one of the most vulnerable. So, when we're involved in an accident and we suffer a sudden and forceful impact to the head, a primary concern is brain injury. To shed some light on the topic of brain injuries, I'm joined by Mark Schuman of Schuman Legal, a leading personal injury law firm based in the heart of Chicago that opened its doors in 1996 and has over 77 combined years of experience advocating for more than 25,000 injury victims and their families. Welcome back, Mark.
Thank you. So nice to see you.
Today, I'd like to pick your brain, no pun intended, maybe a little, about a bit of a beast of a topic. So let's start with laying some groundwork. What is the difference between a concussion and a traumatic brain injury?
A concussion actually is a traumatic brain injury. It occurs after an impact to your head, a whiplash type, where your head goes back and forth or front to back. If it's serious, it could render a person unconscious. A traumatic brain injury is it's a sudden trauma. It causes damage to the brain, and it's also called a traumatic brain injury, also commonly called a TBI. And it can happen either when your head violently strikes an object, or if an object actually pierces your skull and gets into the brain tissue.
What kind of accidents usually result in brain injuries?
Very common in car accidents. Also fall cases where either your head strikes the ground or strikes an object on the way to hit the ground. It's also become very common in sports, especially contact sports like football or hockey, and especially boxing, where you have repeated blows to the head.
I'm no stranger to that. I played hockey as a child.
Hopefully no problems.
No, not yet, thankfully. So in this theoretical environment, an accident has happened. How can I tell how bad the brain injury is?
Most mild brain injuries, you're going to see either redness or swelling or maybe a bump on the head. If you get to the moderate or severe type brain injuries, you're going to have nausea or vomiting. You could have blurred vision, sensitivity to light. Some people could have convulsions or seizures for the more serious ones. Some people have one or both eyes could be dilated. And also even you could have a clear liquid running from your nose. There's also, it affects in a bunch of different ways. So first, if we say physically, that would cover most of it. Then you get into behaviorally. It could lead to depression, irritability, impulsivity, do things impulsively. Some people, a lack of initiation of doing things they would normally like to do. Also, you could have your awareness could be impaired. It also affects sleep issues. If you're sleeping a lot less, insomnia, or on the other end, you're sleeping too much, or you have interrupted sleep, it could affect that way. And lastly, from a cognitive point of view, some people have trouble finding words, memory problems, focusing, lack of attention. So it could happen in a number of different ways.
And it's one thing when the person is an adult and can communicate to a certain extent or can recognize something is off. But what about young children? How can I tell if my child is suffering from a brain injury?
Let's look at all the different age variables. So if you have a very young baby who can't articulate, the first thing you're looking for is, a bump or redness or swelling of the head. If they're irritable where they weren't before, change of behavior, change of sleep patterns, again, where if they're sleeping a lot more than before or not at all. Of course, if you see nausea or vomiting, those are certainly warning signs. They get into a toddler who can now articulate, and they may complain of headaches. Again, the nausea and vomiting, sleep issues the same. Even if they have a loss of interest in doing things they would typically enjoy doing. Or if they have excessive crying, could be a symptom. And then if you get into older kids, 2 and older, now you can have some behavioral changes where you can notice they could have dizziness or balance problems. Again, they could have a double vision or blurry vision, sensitivity to light, sensitivity to sounds or filtering sounds can be an issue. If they have trouble concentrating, trouble remembering, again, lack of initiative for activities. Same with older kids, changes in sleep patterns where all of a sudden they can't fall asleep or they're sleeping too much. And again, and also even changes in mood that could certainly be a warning sign. So lots of different ways it could affect a person.
Right. Knowing what to look for is definitely the first step in assessing the situation and reaching out for both medical and legal help. Walk me through what happens next. What can I expect after a concussion or brain injury?
What's also, what's confusing is sometimes symptoms don't even show up right away. It could take hours or even days. Obviously, you want to see a doctor. Many times a doctor will order an MRI or a CT scan. And even if they come back normal, it doesn't mean that there's no injury. So, and the other thing is sometimes these symptoms are inconsistent. You could feel great one day, and the next day you have the symptoms like right after the injury. Most concussions will resolve themselves in 7 to 14 days if they're mild concussions, like sports injuries. And if you get one of those, the doctor's certainly going to keep you out of sports while you're having at least a week and while you're having those symptoms. And they're probably, if you're having symptoms, they're going to tell you to refrain from doing things like watching TV, texting, having loud music through headphones, things like that, because what it does is it stresses your brain and it actually can prolong the recovery or make your symptoms worse.
Well, that's helpful. And in situations where the injury is moderate or severe, this makes perfect sense. But what if I had a mild traumatic brain injury from an accident? Is it a really big deal?
Could be. I mean, everyone's different. Everyone recovers at a different rate. Everyone has different symptoms. The thing to understand is even a mild one could have long-term effects. So if you're having some of the things we discussed, certainly you should consult with a doctor. Again, a lot of people do recover, but a lot of people have ongoing problems. So you really have to pay attention to the changes in sleep and how you're feeling and the behavioral like we talked about. And if you are noticing it or if it's not getting better, you should definitely consult with the doctor.
Let's talk about some of those consequences you mentioned. What kind of long-term effects do I have to plan for after a brain injury?
Well, I mean, the most common are depression, mood changes. Obviously, if they're bad enough, it could affect a relationship. If you start talking about the really moderate to severe ones, I mean, there are people it could affect your ability, walking, your coordination. Some people even paralysis. Loss of fine motor skills, like even buttoning a shirt can be a problem for people. Some people have problems, carrying objects or can affect, vision problems, like we talked about, double vision or blurry vision. Some people, memory problems, difficulty remembering, and sometimes it affects social relationships. So depending on the severity, it could definitely have long-term effects.
And how long does it usually take to recover from a brain injury?
Well, if it's a mild TBI or traumatic brain injury, a good majority of people will recover in 1 to 3 months. Once you're over 40, sadly, it takes a little bit longer. But again, the recovery for each person is different. Just like regular injuries, some are going to recover faster, some are going to take longer. The most common things are headaches or cognitive delay, where the brain is just not processing things as efficiently as it was before. So, or you feel like you're in a fog. And so at the end of the day, your brain stressed out, you feel more exhausted. And that can lead to frustration. And again, it can lead to mood change and things like that. So you really have to watch your symptoms, but that, depending on the severity, some people have ongoing long-term symptoms like that.
All of this is such important information, and medical attention is certainly key. When it comes to legal support, how do I know if I should reach out to an attorney if I've had this type of injury?
Well, I would say certainly if it's from a car accident or a fall on someone's property where there may be some negligence on the part of the landowner, I would certainly consult with an attorney. I know, my office offers a free consultation so we can talk about it and see. If you're having symptoms, I mean, first and foremost, I tell all my clients, get the medical care you need, find out what's wrong with you, find out what can be done to help you. Certainly, if there's a legal issue involved where it is from a car accident or a fall on someone's property, I would strongly recommend talking to an attorney. We have a free consultation so we can talk about it and see if there's something there. The thing also I wanted to say before is, how are some of the things you can do to help yourself? If you're having these symptoms, most doctors are going to recommend, number one, get enough sleep. Number two, eat properly. If you're having symptoms, they're going to tell you to refrain from alcohol and keep yourself well hydrated. All these are important things. And even last, and even if you're having symptoms and you exercise, they'll usually tell you to exercise very lightly. So again, you're not taxing your brain. So you really have to try to help yourself, and B, if you're having these symptoms and you haven't seen a doctor, I can't stress enough how important it is to see someone that actually deals with traumatic brain injury so that you can get the proper help you need.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And with traumatic brain injuries affecting thousands of adults and children in the United States a year, I know that having you provide answers to some of the most frequently asked questions about the legal side of getting post-accident support will benefit so many. So thank you for lending your expertise to us today, Mark.
I hope so. Yeah, thank you. My pleasure. It's a serious thing, and hopefully people get the treatment that they need.
Absolutely.